Yeah, we're now joined by Keith Wood. Keith, I don't know if you've been listening to the show, but the only place to start on this beautiful morning is, are you a fan of the darts?
I'm not a fan of the darts.
What?
No, and I know that sounds ludicrous because everybody seems to be. I haven't been watching telly recently, so I'm out of the loop is the easiest way to put it, lads.
I've actually gotten kind of used now to, in the evening, putting on Off the Ball or Lyric FM or something like that. I'm gone off the TV as well. What's it with you, Woody? Is it like just you're doing different stuff, or?
Yeah, different stuff, and I'm often working fairly late. So one of our clients is in the States, so we'd have calls that are fairly late in the evening. So that kind of, I think, makes a mess of it. And then at that stage, I'm a bit tired. I'm trying to put something stupid on maybe on Netflix or something I've seen before, so that I'm not thinking too much at night time, so I can get a decent night's sleep.
Shane, Hannon, any reaction to Woody on the darts?
No, it's a fair point. It's like Marmite. It's like Marmite, to be fair. And Woody makes a good point. I mean, a lot of us don't have the time to be sitting down watching television anymore. Like, I haven't watched as much of the darts as I would have liked. So, no, that's a fair point. There's only so many sports we can watch, Johnny, to be fair.
Yeah, and one of them is not going to be rugby, unfortunately, on the 26th, Woody.
No, which look, is very disappointing from a whole variety of different reasons. And of course, the reason that it has to be off is because guys have COVID, and I think it's causing carnage again. And it's very hard for, it's funny, we were talking a few weeks ago about Munster down in and getting stuck down in South Africa, and how unbelievably hard that is when you're tested every day all the time. You have to be so careful with every single thing, and then we seem to have a new variant at the moment that's far more transmissible, and it just means it looks like we have to reevaluate how we're doing different things. I think it's very, very tough for them, for the players on that side. From Munster's perspective, it's kind of great that it's postponed, but this was a big bumper day for Munster, and has been, and they haven't had it for the last couple of years. And sport's suffering quite heavily financially at the moment. It was very interesting during the week listening to Pat Lam having a discussion that if COVID continues to flourish and fans aren't in, that there is a risk to the sport in itself. And he's talking about one of the wealthiest backers in the game, behind Bristol, and yet he still is saying this is nerve-wracking for everybody because the money has been kind of leached out of the game because of COVID. So I think it's very tough. It's a very tough time for sport in general, actually.
Just on that, like, and because the restrictions, I've had very, very mixed views on restrictions nearly all along, and sometimes I've been probably very wrong on it. But is there any evidence whatever that going to an outdoor event like Thomond Park or whatever, or Lansdowne Road, is actually a spreader? Like, so is there a case sometimes that I found that the sporting bodies are so kind of beholden to the government that they just don't seem to say anything about these things?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking me, and I'm not going to take the exact same line as the governing bodies, but I won't be far off it. For me, I think you do have to get to the point where you trust public health and what they're actually saying, because it isn't just for maybe the people that may get infected, but it's for the impact that puts on the health system, and is our health system able to take much more of it? And it isn't really. So I think we do have to protect elements of that. I do think outside seems to have been, in the last period of time, safe enough. But I do think there's a high level of fear. And, a lot of the conversations I'm having, there's a high level of fear at the present moment in time in terms of the transmissibility of this variant. And they don't know enough. So I think having a conservative nature is, in my view, is the right thing to do. And because we don't know enough yet. And with each change that happens, the decisions are made. Yes, it puts people under pressure, and economically under pressure, and a whole variety of other things under pressure. But this is a unique experience, and it isn't as if it's just Ireland that's dealing with it. It's the world that's dealing with it. They're all dealing with it in different ways. None of them seem to be getting ahead of it over anybody else. So, look, I don't know. I think for me, you have to trust public health, because they have to get the balance right with it. And I think at times it's opened too early and closed too early. But what do we know? So I think in a lot of cases, there's huge reaction to different things. There's emotional reactions because there should be an emotional reaction. But we don't have all the facts. And there's people having to make decisions that impact on us. And I don't know that it's easy for any of them. And I think it's just a terrible position that we're in. And we're all totally fatigued by it because we just say, all we got to do is get out of the bloody thing, and let life go on as normal, whatever normal is, or whatever a new normal is.
Can't remember anymore.
Yeah, well, exactly. So I don't know, I would still be saying get out into the countryside as much as you possibly can and get as much recreational exercise as you can, because that's the only thing that'll keep the spirits up at this time of the year.
It's a fair point, Keith, and like you mentioned Pat Lamb's comments, and interesting to see him talk about the Premier League decision to keep sport going over the Christmas and New Year is an important one for rugby as well. Like when you look at this decision, and even over the weekend we had, of course, the news I think emerged on Saturday that Leinster were looking to appeal the punishment that came their way, having not been able to field a team in that Champions Cup game against Montpellier. Like, I know Jerry Thornley was on with us this week, and he was kind of saying he doesn't expect that the Leinster appeal will be successful. But what do you make of that? Because as you said, like, this is affecting all teams everywhere in every sport, COVID at the minute and Omicron. What did you make of this idea and the likelihood possibly that Leinster's appeal won't be successful and that they will in fact be punished for what happened last week?
Yeah, I look again because we don't know all the detail in relation to it. And of course, there's always rumour and counter rumour that happens when everything like this happens. But we don't know all the facts on it. As it looked from the outside, Leinster were able to field a team that Irish Public Health said was okay. And so the objection I'd have to the fact that Leinster got a 28-0 result put against them was it just was totally out of kilter with what had happened the previous week with Wasps when players pulled out the morning of the game. It just doesn't make any sense. You're looking for consistency in relation to it. So with that, without having full access to all the information, you're looking at it from the outside and you'd say, well, that doesn't seem particularly fair. And if it isn't fair, well, then they have a case to argue against it, especially when 24 hours later, the French government pulled every French team out of it. So if it had been delayed a day or the match was on a day later, they wouldn't have had a 28-0 against them. So that just shows you how bloody awkward it is. I mean, and I have sympathy for the organisers, because this changes not every day. This changes every hour at certain times, and the pressure that they're put under is colossal. And again, we're trying to say that this is unique. So the reaction for this has to be some level of balance to try and figure out a way to see if you can get that game back on the cards, unless there's more information there that we don't know about.
And surely, like this Six Nations, I don't know, has there been a Six Nations with such going for it in terms of the quality of the top sort of teams? But surely there's not going to be. Are we going to be anyway fearful that this will be somewhat behind closed doors? Will there be repercussions in February?
I'd be fearful of it, I have to say, at this stage, at this remove. The numbers in the UK are fairly colossal. They're up at 95,000 cases a day, which is it's a huge number. So you have that on one side. You have a fair element of restrictions of travel still. People are saying that it's difficult. I mean, I had a few flights this year. I normally fly a huge amount. I didn't fly at all for about 15 months, and I've only had a few. It's awkward enough, I have to say, and it's not something I'm jumping up and down to do all the time. I think there will be restrictions, but I don't think it'll be behind closed doors. I think there'll be a limited number in there. That's guesswork entirely at this stage, because you just don't know. But it has a huge impact. And I can tell you that, yes, there was some decent rugby behind closed doors, but actually the vast majority of it wasn't decent. You need the supporters. Like, the reason this show exists is because of supporters, the sport. You need people in there shouting, getting emotional, the great rivalries. And I can tell you as a former player that the energy that comes from the crowd is often the determining factor of whether you can win or not. You know, you're feeding off that energy. Without it, it's harder. Now, we've seen brilliant rugby in the last few months. I mean, really, really exciting and interesting. It's almost like a reawakening in the sport. And I think if we go behind closed doors again, that could put a little bit of a stall in that.
Keith, another story that's kind of it got us talking a lot in the last week is, of course, Johan van Graan's impending departure to Bath. And I was really interested to hear Brian Kerr at the weekend talking about Stephen O'Donnell heading from St. Pat's to Dundalk, and the kind of his surprise at that sort of exit, and talking about loyalty and that sort of thing. And I'm not trying to compare the two, but certainly surprise exits always get us talking in sport. But what's your take on how this has all played out in the last week or two with Johan van Graan and his impending departure to Bath?
Yeah, I think loyalty is one of those great things. It's one of the great discussion points, and there's nothing that annoys fans more than an apparent lack of loyalty. So I do think that that's one of the really interesting ones. I'd also put a point that loyalty is a two-way street. You can't be loyal one way. So a lot of times guys leave clubs and the fans bemoan the fact that they've left, but they've left because they didn't feel the club was showing them enough love or whatever it was. In Van Graan's case, or in coaches' cases, I think it's slightly different. I think all coaches have to buy into the idea of developing a team and a squad in a province and leaving something afterwards. That's what they will always say, and that's what they always have to say. The practical reality of an awful lot of it is that they're counted on their results on the field and on the time that they're there. And so the ongoing loyalty is probably the wrong word to use. You want them to be unbelievably professional, actually. And the loyalty thing is I have to say, probably secondary, because most coaches don't stay in a place for very long, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe tops. So they're going to move somewhere else, and they're going to show their loyalty somewhere else. So, look, we talked about the Van Graan bit. For me, I'm just still bewildered by the fact you can have a break clause. With 6 months, it's very hard to build a team and a club and a future around having your main coach having a 6 month break clause.
Just on that, Keith, that's a big issue as well in League of Ireland with players now, but it's far more understandable because obviously they want to progress to a higher level. But what was the thinking there in terms of Munster allowing that to be there in the first place from your remove?
Well, it's not Munster, it's the IRFU.
The IRFU, rather, sorry.
They're IRFU contracts, and he's an IRFU employee. So the head guys in all the provinces, so the head coach, I think the head doctor, head physio, are all IRFU employees, not the provincial employees. So I think it's to give them the space out of it. And so it's a two-way break clause, so everybody can break with 6 months notice. And for me, I know your coach mightn't work out well and you might want to get rid of him, but that means you have to go down to the level of succession planning that you're doing, your interview process and actually getting the coach. But too often we seem to be reacting to having to get a coach in 6 months as opposed to building up that succession planning. And for me, I think it's to do with that contract. And if a guy wants to get out of his contract, he's going to have to buy his way out of his contract. And at least you're not in a bad position in that circumstance if you have a 2 or 3 year contract. So if you're building something out and you have someone there for 2 years, that's fantastic. If it's up and out, I think that puts a huge pressure on it. I think it's one of the difficulties in sport, actually. If the head man carries the can for a huge amount of how the province goes about its work. So,
yeah,
and Munster have had an awful lot of variability with that. There's been a lot of changes of coaches in the last 7 or 8 years, 8 or 9 years. So, Munster are looking for stability. So, for me, having a 6 month break kind of takes away from that stability.
We had obviously Ronan O'Gara giving his views on who the next head coach might be, and obviously Declan Kidney's been linked with the role. The last kind of list I saw would have had Prendergast and Roundtree as the top two, maybe most likely. But regards to who gets the job, Keith, what's sort of the upside and downside to taking over Munster? You've already referenced some of it there in terms of the contractual situation, but whoever replaces Van Graan, what's he thinking?
Well, look, I think I'm going to just change that slightly, and I will answer it, but I think the remit of the job has to be incredibly well defined, and I think it has to be defined along the ideas that this will be, and this is my view, not anybody else's, but that it will be about the promotion of players from within, so from within the Munster system, and then looking to try and get additional marquee players or whatever to support that. But they can't be marquee players that, in my view, go off and play for other countries. I think they need to be retired international players, because you need to get the best out of them for the 12 months of the year, not just for periods of time, because coming back from internationals is very tiring. And actually one of the elements that we have with Ireland is that a lot of the players from the provinces go and play for Ireland, so they're always going to be tired, and they're incredibly well managed. So that is a big plus and a minus for a coach coming in, because he doesn't get to pick his players all the time. And that's dictated to by the IRFU when those players need to have a rest. So that is one of the negative elements. The plus is there's an incredible support, and it is a great stadium. There's a great history. They're underachieving in the point that they're not winning trophies, and the expectation from every Munster fan is that they'll win something. That's, when you're underachieving, the only thing, if you can get that to improve, well, life becomes an awful lot easier for a new coach. So it's a very big mark in the game, and but it needs to be, I think, for a coach, it needs to be something that is not just what they do in the 3 or 4 years. Is there an element of legacy that's built in? So, and I talked about the remit for the coach, but also to the structure for Munster. Do they do something else? Do they use this as an opportunity to turbocharge the schools and the clubs? Because people often complain about, and it is a complaint about what Leinster have in their private school system. It misses the point a little bit. There's no point looking over the hedge and saying they've got a great over there. Munster have an incredibly robust club and schools game. It's just not that fully well coordinated, and it needs to be organised a bit differently. It can't be the same as Leinster. It has to be done differently. So that really needs to be addressed. If that gets addressed, you'll get more players being drip fed into the Munster team, but also in 3 and 5 and 7 years' time, you'll have another core of players coming through, and that has to be essential. So, for Munster to buy its way out of trouble, I don't know that that's necessarily the thing that has to happen. And actually, I think there'd be more patience if you could see a lot of the youth getting a chance, and you can see the reaction when. Because of COVID, when rafts of young players have had to go in and play in the squad, the reaction of the fans has been pretty phenomenal, and the reaction of the players has been pretty decent too.
Yeah, really, that's really fascinating to touch on, Keith, because when you talk about the club and the fans and the stadium and the Munster way and all that sort of stuff, and much has been kind of discussed about this need for maybe Munster to get away from the traditional quote-unquote Munster values and a certain way of playing. And I used to hate listening to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer give interviews as Manchester United manager after games where they lost, talking about the Man United way and playing football a certain type of way. Do you think Munster need a certain type of way of playing? Is this a perfect opportunity to kind of move away from that, or is too much made of this quote unquote Munster way?
I think there's a lot made of it that's wrong, and there's a lot made of it that's right. If I go back, and it's very important, I think at times we seem to forget as if the provinces were always the be all and end all. They weren't, right? So, I played. There was in 1998. There was 500 people turned up to the Leinster Munster match. Right,
incredible, isn't it?
Right, so that's it. And in 1992, Gary Owen played Shannon in Thomond Park, and there was anything from 14 to 17,000 people at it because there was more people climbing over the walls. And it was crazy. And so that was a huge game. It was a huge time. It was viewed very differently. You played 3 or 4 games for Munster in a year. They had a style because that was the style that was a kind of decent blend of Cork and Limerick for the most part. But I look back at Munster in the whole 2000s, right? And I played for 1 season with them, and I played a couple of matches with them before the World Cup in 2003. But in that period of time, if you said, what is the Munster way of playing? And if you hear people saying it's up the jumper, it was not up the jumper. It was a blend of forwards and backs. It wasn't Leinster. Leinster were far, fancier, far more pace and skill. Or now I'm going to say skill, but in that kind of pure skill, I would have said Munster were a more natural skill, and we weren't as fit as Leinster, and definitely not as fit as Ulster, and that was kind of the way it was. So what I would say about the Munster way is the Munster way should be about its closeness to its supporters, it's the values and behaviours of the club. That's what the Munster way has to be, not the way they play. They don't have a particular way of playing. And in the last few years, we've had a way of playing because of I think the laws of the game, which meant kicking was absolutely at a premium from about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, absolutely at a premium. If you box kick the ball, you had a great chance of getting it back. That has changed now, and we have not changed with it. And so that's the elements that needs to change. But it has to be exciting as well. It just has to be. If we go back to the very start that you asked me about, did I watch darts? There are so many sports that are available for people to watch. It has to be exciting.
You mentioned the kicking, because I'm in and out with rugby. I was really struck by how much Leicester, and as a consequence, Connacht kicked the ball on Sunday. But just a couple of questions before you go, Keith. Declan Kidney, obviously, have to ask you about that, the link with Munster again.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. And I think he's given himself a great chance to be put into a really good structure. And London Irish is a very good structure, and an awful lot of things that are new and are going with them. And I think Declan is a man who'd like to see his things through. Now, I haven't spoken to him about it, but I also think it has to be a big build for the future. And I do think that there's an opportunity for people to get back involved in Munster once they've gone away. I don't think you should be closing the door to anybody. But whether that's a head coach or a director of rugby or a head of rugby or a consultant for rugby or whatever it is, I don't know. But like when we're looking at who's the head coach, I'm absolutely racking my brain for it. And there's not, like, Munster will get one and they'll get a good one, but they also need to get somebody that's more involved, who effectively holds the keys to Munster rugby. You need to have somebody there with a long-term vision, in my view, because it's been reactive for a lot of years now. So what is the plan? What is the sustainable plan? What's the plan for having a proper succession plan for players and coaches? So that doesn't exist.
Shane?
Yeah. Like, as well, Keith, like, even talking about Munster at the weekend, and there's been a bit of negativity around the game against Cast, regardless of the result. And I know Van Graan has kind of come out and spoken about the need to get more game time into the legs of the likes of Simon Zebo and Mike Healy, who haven't played since mid-October. But I'm wondering, look, you see a lot of aimless kicking from that Munster team at the weekend as well. Like, is it tough for a player to get themselves G'd up when they know a head coach is leaving like this mid-season, or is that being a bit facetious about the whole thing? Like, will that have an impact on the player's psychology at this point of the season?
I would always say no, but I'm often wrong on that one. It never bothered me. The coach is going, right, he's going next. You should be a little bit heartless about these things. And then you really need to be playing at the highest standard you can to, to make a really good impression on who the next coach will be. But I don't know whether that's putting them under pressure. I still feel at times we revert to slowing the game down and kicking it too much. So is the criticism for the game last week. Cast won 1 in 27 games away. They kind of turned up to play in their way. They weren't looking to do an awful lot. And you thought by them kicking out on the full, they didn't even bother going for more. They were happy with the 1 point that they got there. They thought that was a huge success. I don't know. I thought it was a very, very flat game of rugby and hard to watch and not the most enjoyable. Now, Munster won. So, you don't want to argue against that all the time, but you do know if it was an isolated incident, you'd say Liverpool winning ugly. Yeah, fantastic. And you'll take it, but they often don't. They often win with aplomb. And so I think as a one-off, you'll accept it. It's not a one-off, so you'll say, yeah, that's not exciting enough. And that was a lot of people in the ground and a lot of people, not overly excited by it.
Finally, Keith, Ultan Deland, leaving Connacht, 122 appearances. Obviously, they were involved in that really, really good game on Sunday. Came back with a losing bonus point at least. What does this mean to them?
I think it's a huge loss for them, and I think it is. I think it's a great move for him. I don't know where he's going. I think they were saying La Rochelle.
That's the rumour, yeah.
That's the rumour, and so the opportunity to go and play overseas is a great opportunity and a huge opportunity. And I think he has come around to the idea that he doesn't really feature in Ireland's plans. And that this is the opportunity for him to go and experience a different way of playing, a different way of living, earn more money, I presume, and have a new life experience. So he's given 10 years to Connacht, which is a huge period of time. So I think he should be wished farewell. And I actually think we'll see him again in a few years' time because he's young enough. And he might end out playing a couple of years back here. But I think it's, that's a natural step for somebody who has still ambitions to experience life.
And no new life experience of darts for you?
Sorry, I missed that?
No new life experience of the darts for you?
No, absolutely not. No. Well, do you know what? I never say never. I'm quite happy to watch it. I need to drag my sons in to see if they'll get excited and I'll get excited with them. That might work.
Thanks a million, Keith.
Cheers, gents. Great to talk to you. Have a lovely Christmas, and to all our listeners.
Same to yourself.